For today, the lecture will be on civic monitoring for environmental law enforcement, what spaces in courts and in extrajudicial settings. And we have an expert on the topic with us, that is Berti Suman. Anna is a researcher, lawyer, and activist on civic environmental monitoring. She is research fellow in sustainable innovation law at Lewis University in Rome. She has also founded and leads the Sensing for Justice project on civic evidence for environmental law enforcement. She is a qualified barrister following climate and environmental law cases at Systasis, Center for the Prevention and Management of Environmental Conflicts in Milan. And Systasis is also one of our GROMADA partners. We are also grateful to have with us Irina Yarmolenko, who is experienced in the developing and modernization of local communities and doing policies at the local level in Ukraine, with 8 years of professional experience in local policy and public participation. She is the founder and project manager of the Innovation Reconstruction Society. So without any further ado, I leave you the floor, Anna, and we are all keen to learn more about today's topic.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for tuning in all the participants simultaneously now and afterwards. I invite you for any point that is unclear or you would like to have more information to already use the chat or the Q&A function to put questions so we can then take them on board for the discussion, both for my talk and for Irina's talk that will follow. Some of you may already have engaged in our webinar series and have heard me talking about civic monitoring for natural resources conservation, in particular connected with the forest monitoring research done at Copenhagen University, or also you heard about civic monitoring and the Aarhus Convention. Both these lectures are available with all the others GROMADA webinar series on YouTube. So I invite you to also catch up with them if you'd like to stay connected. But today we will talk about what space is there for forms of data gathered by civil society on environmental matters in court spaces, so in tribunals, but also beyond the judicial setting, for example, in environmental mediation spaces. I here represent partner Systasis, but also my work stems from a 3.5 years long journey in which I funded a research project supported by a Marie Curie Individual Fellowship and by the Research Council of the Netherlands called Sensing for Justice. Sensing for Justice focuses on 3 main pillars. First, it tries to investigate, based on case studies, how communities affected by environmental issues can bring evidence to court based on civic environmental monitoring and citizen science. Then it discusses the possibility to recognize these activities under a new right, the right to contribute environmental information as a sort of expansion of the Aarhus Convention, to which also Ukraine is party, on participation of civil society in environmental matters. And third, it posits that civic monitoring can also trigger processes of mediation, of conflict mediation in spaces that are more informal, closer to civil society, to public administration, and eventually also to industry. So first of all, what is civic environmental monitoring about? Some of you may not have heard this concept, so I would like to show you the possibilities of civic monitoring in various contexts. Essentially, civic environmental monitoring is about gathering evidence on the status of the environment through what you have It can be through your eyes, through your senses, for example, smelling an odor that is not right, or can also be, for example, taking notes of changes in the climate or recording an extreme weather event. So it can range from pollution instances to hurricanes, to floods, to presence of toxic contaminants in your land. And this multiplicity is always connected to the desire of people to demonstrate a problem to somebody else. It can be another citizen. So, for example, I want to warn my neighbors that we live in a polluted area, but it can also be towards an authority. For example, in this sketch, you can see the Environmental Protection Agency and the civil society actors striving for demonstrating to the authority that there was pollution in the land. In particular, this was the sensor they are using in this drawing is about monitoring air quality. So how did I came up with this topic of research, and especially how does it connect with the notion of enforcing environmental law, promoting the respect of the current existing laws on the environment for environmental protection? Well, actually the story starts quite some years ago. The quality of the picture is not great, but I was quite young. I had the opportunity to work for an NGO, an association that represents the 30,000 victims of the Chevron Texaco case in Amazonia, in the Amazon rainforest. The case is about the discharge of oil, of polluting oil in the rainforest with environmental and health consequences for the local people. It's one of the study case in international environmental law because it shows how corporation can manage to find ways to avoid liability in court because the responsible company moved all its assets to other spaces, to, for example, countries like Argentina or back to the US to avoid the ruling that was against them in the country of Ecuador. The victims of this pollution didn't stay silent. They started a long court proceedings, but also a long advocacy campaign, which lasts up to date. And what is more interesting is that they came up with civic monitoring. They started monitoring the rainforest themselves to demonstrate the pollution. And many years later, they even managed to publish an open access article in Environmental Research Letters where they discuss, and one of the authors is actually Donald Moncayo, the person that was standing close to me, together with researchers, but also with other local indigenous people. They managed to bring a court case in the court of Nueva Loja in Ecuador, demonstrating illegal gas flaring. And they mapped this practice, which should have been banned by law, through participatory mapping, where people went on the ground and spotted data, evidence that were not reported by the official register for gas flaring instances, the one that the authority held. And this is interesting for our project, GROMADA, because especially in conflict situation, data from the ground may be missing. There may be black hole spaces where the institution doesn't manage to get by purpose or by lack of resources. And the use of crowd mapping, of mapping on the ground, is so essential also to understand, for example, where needs for recovery and reconstruction are situated. And the reason why Irina will also join us is that it's way more important to think about how can civic monitoring complement existing data on needs on the ground, rather than think to court proceedings, because court proceedings last a lot and sometimes do not deliver justice in a timely manner. Whereas civic monitoring can already trigger interventions before and sometimes without a court intervene mandating these actions. So let's stay tuned. Many years later, I was again observing oil pollution, but this time I was not in Ecuador in the rainforest. I was just in the south of my country, in Italy, where there is a strong oil extraction business industry. And this oil industry has been undergoing 2 criminal proceedings for environmental disaster and a number of civil proceedings for damage because of the environmental and health consequences associated with oil extraction. Again, here, I could observe local people taking action to demonstrate what I frame as informational monopolies, which means that there is a situation where the information is not shared horizontally with the concerned citizen. And I'm sure many people in Ukraine will perceive this lack of access to information and the need to come up with alternative ways through social innovation, civil society participation, to document what's going on the ground. And here there is an article which you can also find in the chat, as well as for the other article that I wrote documenting how civil society actors were demonstrating environmental harms in the south of the north. So it seems it's Basilicata, but it seems Ecuador. It's really, in a way, environmental damages are very similar everywhere, but luckily also the desire of people to mobilize and to intervene, to demand justice. So how can civic evidence actually enter the court arena? Let me introduce you a case which is very successful. This is the case of Diane Wilson and her community of shrimpers, fishers of shrimps in a bay in Texas, where they managed to demonstrate a strong violation of the Clean Water Act of applicable environmental law in the US, using what they had, which was a kayak and a number of bags of plastic noodles of plastic, where they filled and they put all the plastic discharge that they would find in their bay. And they brought all this evidence gathered in a systematic way, but in a relatively simple way, with geolocation, to lawyers, pro bono lawyers that supported them, and to a court. And they managed to obtain a 30 million order, let's say damage order, through which they are restoring the bay and their fishery activity. And this is back to 2019, but then the US enforced a new standard for plastic production, informing and enforcing the ruling through a sort of ban of plastic discharge. And Diane Wilson won a prestigious environmental protection award called the Goldman Prize for Environmental Protection in 2023. Now, what can we learn from these successful cases? Here again, the case where the Ecuador court banned gas flaring. First is that a court ruling that used the evidence from civil society and actually puts on a precedent should be closely used and watched over, because first, it doesn't ensure that the ruling is fully implemented. So the sentinels, the civic monitoring people, have a role even after the banning of a certain environmental stressor. But this precedent can be used in other cases in other countries to litigate similar cases based on the data gathered by civil society. And another good case, which I also researched in an article with a colleague who was actually the lawyer of this case. She is from she's from Strathclyde University, but she was formerly working as a lawyer in the US, Amelia Burnett, and she together with me, we together demonstrated how this huge coal ash case in North Carolina was in part based on civic evidence submitted through cooperation with lawyers. So here, perhaps the message to all the Ukrainian colleagues listening to us is to partner up with lawyers from an early stage to understand which evidence is missing and is needed to bring the offenders to court. And in a workshop that we organized with legal experts on the GROMADA mission, we actually discussed with experts engaged in the registry of damage under the Council of Europe, which evidentiary standards is being applied to the data that is being used and will be used to document all the harms that war is causing in Ukraine. And these cases that I'm mentioning to you may sound less relevant because they're not in a war case scenario, because essentially my expertise is in context, peaceful context, yet they can be used as precedent in your cases to demonstrate that in certain situations, civil society managed to bring a precedent to court and to bring a polluter to court based on civic evidence. So I hope this can be motivation. Now, the Sensing for Justice project started essentially to bring all these lessons to Europe. So we wanted to look for cases in Europe. Thus, it includes also Ukraine, because it's not just the EU as a scope. All the cases where civic evidence entered courts or triggered alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, which are mechanisms in which the parties find a settlement, often with the help of a mediator or an arbitral tribunal, in order to find a solution outside the court. Because, as I said at the beginning, the court is very, a court proceeding is very expensive, lasts long, and may not be ideal for everyone. So the Sensing for Justice project demonstrated how environmental issues may lead to civic environmental monitoring, which can create a strong knowledge base on a certain environmental harm. And when institutions manage to recognize this knowledge base and this contribution, there can actually be a conflict mediation results between the citizen and organization and institutions and polluters in order to find a shared way to act upon the problem. So civic environmental monitoring can both be used for claiming justice, damages, reparation, but also to foster a sort of networks to establish cooperation with other associations, with, for example, NGOs and networks. And this is why we believe that one of the missions of GROMADA is to bring people from different civil society organizations in touch with our Ukrainian participants to ensure that they can support each other and especially share resources, ideas, cases, tools, in order for the Citizen Science and Civic Monitoring Initiative in Ukraine to leverage on the experience of other countries and other initiatives. So, what are the cases that we found in Italy? Mostly, they were not used in court, but rather as alert for public prosecutors. And this can also be interesting for Ukraine, because there are many cases where existing resources of the community, of the local community, may not enable the community to bring evidence up to the court stage, but yet is important and is valuable to have this evidence there, because it can trigger a prosecutor, a public prosecutor, so public inquiry, to open, for example, a criminal proceeding for environmental damage. And the example I can bring is this case I heavily researched in south of Italy. It was during COVID, so it was a site that was accessible. I would have hoped to go also to Texas and to very many other countries, but this was kind of an accessible site of inquiry. And the case is very interesting because it's using official Earth observation, adding to it local knowledge, for example, pictures of strange death of fishes, or analysis of water streams that are being polluted. And they publish all this data on their website, where they managed to get actually the interest of other civil society organizations, which are asking them to do their sort of geospatial intelligence for them, acting as really sentinels on the ground, both from below and from the above. And the case is very interesting because it challenged existing monopolies of information and offered evidence for prosecutors to start a proceeding. So this is just a picture I took on the ground where a person was there gathering evidence to demonstrate the presence of toxic oil pollution in their water. So just concluding, the methodology embraced to research this topic was based on a combination of review of cases and of literature, field research, but I also wanted to engage participants in more participatory ways. For example, through slow ethnography, where I was working in the field and mapping what I was encountering, through a visual cartography, with the help, of course, of a cartographer, but also collaborating with artists to use art-based research in order for this topic to emerge in a way that is more accessible to different publics. And in this dissemination phase, it was very important to use storytelling, drawings, emotional engagement, especially because for people, the grievance, the suffering of an environmental loss, or of all the type of losses associated with the war, in your case, in case of the initiatives that are engaging with Ukraine, environmental harms, can be very stressful. And so in order not to victimize these people, it's very important to use methods that are more engaging, more empathic. And lastly, we believe that in the future, this approach can be replicated and expanded to embrace all the discussion on climate displaced people and environmentally displaced people. Think, for example, to all the territories that have been destroyed during the war in Ukraine, which environmental consequences and, for example, loss of climate adaptability will last for years and decades to come. And all the people that will have to flee their homelands, because maybe not just for the bombs, but because the territory has become inhabitable. This is already terrible in the short term. In the long term, will be a massive loss of environmental richness, for example, such as biodiversity, natural resources. And so we need to understand how climate displaced and environmentally displaced people are gathering evidence that can demonstrate harm in court. And there is a little study that I will share. I actually will share it myself because I didn't share it in advance, which will be a first step towards demonstrating how environmental and climate migrants can actually offer evidence to demonstrate violations of climate and environmental laws. And to conclude, I thank you for your attention. I invite you to engage further, both with the Sensing for Justice Instagram page, with GROMADA Ukraine, with the LinkedIn page, the project web page, also our YouTube channel. For any question, you are very welcome to contact me later on, or use the chat now, or the Q&A, actually better, the Q&A function. I thank you, especially all the interpreters that supported us, the moderator, Nicole, and all the consortium that supported us, the GROMADA partners, and of course, the European Union for the funding. I would like now to hand over to Irina, because when I was talking about our project with a colleague from the Observatory of Civic Assemblies, he told me about a professional, a brilliant professional who was actually working hard to engage local communities in a just and sustainable reconstruction. And I felt, how is this important in terms of connecting to GROMADA? Well, essentially, all the civic monitoring that you can imagine has always an objective. And this objective is essentially to rebuild, to build better, to have information to trigger actions. So what are the actions that we are imagining? What are the actions that we need? Well, I believe that a person from the ground, on the ground, can better share it with us. So without further ado, I would like to pass the word to Irina Yarmolenko and welcome her to our webinar.
Irina, you're muted.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. It was very interesting to listen to your presentation about citizen engagement. And as far I have 15 minutes, I will be trying shortly introduce from where I am, which we used to be, and what happens, and how we engage citizens. So shortly, I'm going to share now the video. You can see this. This is my city, Irpin. It's 7 kilometers to Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. You can see what we receive after bombing of Russians, our city. We used to be one of the richest cities before the war, and now, during 2 years, we figure out with these consequences. So now, if you come, you wouldn't feel like this. You will feel like you are in a new city, more or less. Of course, we have some districts, like which destroyed, but some of these places, like these cars, it's already memorial. New constructions on progress, and also citizens received their new apartments. And as well, this is a university, for example, which I used to be an advisor to the head of university, and each of these locations I know very well. So you can imagine my feelings when I used to live in this city, when I used to work in this city, and when I saw what Russian enemy done with our territory. And first, when we come back to our city and to see these results, we asked what we can do. And we decided to invite all citizens, all specialists all over the world for this project, which we called Irpin Reconstruction Summit. And I kindly ask you, let me know whether you can see now the presentation.
Very good. thanks.
Yeah, it's work. So we called them European Reconstruction Summit because we make a huge announce that we are looking for specialists all over the world, and as well from our city and local cities. Everyone who can help, any help, fundraising, project managers, architects, designers, climate specialists, experts from different areas who can help, because you know, when you are not in the fire fields, you sitting at home and you asking what I could do. You can't be just staying at home when your country under the fire, because some of the part was more or less safe, and some of the cities received attacked and received bombs and etc. And it was fights. So we united 200 Ukrainian international specialists for this to fight with these consequences. You can see photo of them on these pictures. Finally, we received from them 22 design and architecture offers, objects of residential, and we calculated the 100 objects of residential construction which were destroyed, and 20 social facilities. And for all that project you saw destroyed or being attacked, we showed how the city could like. So it gives new breeze, not only for people who work for city council, but also for citizens who need to come back for the city, because it was evacuation 80,000, and then citizens come back. So we give the breeze to feel first they are engaged, and we engage them for these reconstruction processes, and they are important. Second, we asked about their professional expertise, which is also important to feel for citizens that they are the owners of this city, that they are participants of this city, that they make a policy of this city. And of course, it should be very professional level, because you want to make your city better. So we organize the management board, and we were working under the mayor and the vice mayor and all the council team. Then we organize international strategy advisory boards, and Gensler, biggest architect American company, joined for this process. And then from Italy, Stefano Boeri from which Vertical Forest, very famous in Milan, joined. Also Domenico Vito, climate specialist for European project. Also Vlad Malashevsky from Italy, he's originally from Ukraine. Also Marco Mari from Green Building Council, Italy, and etc. etc. A lot of Italian stakeholders we received for this international strategy advisory board. And also we have local strategy group. Then we divided for urbanists, architects, environmental specialists, financial specialists, energy managers, logistic and transport engineers, and monitoring and controlling the process. Then, as I said, we have 200 participants. So we have a list of our destroyed buildings, and we divide for the 5 or 6 person per group, sometimes 10, and they were working for the very specific items. So this is a citizen engagement for the process of reconstruction our city. We were first because Irpin was 76% destroyed, and we were first who were deoccupied so fast, immediately. During like 1 month, everything happened, and everything, and the enemy gone. So we need to be first, and we never had this experience. Everything what we did by our heart. Now there's a lot of specialists in this area, a lot of experts coming, a lot of organization, but at the beginning, it was really very, very sensitive. So you can see also the structure, it's the same what I explained in this way. You see like decision makers, PMO, it's fundraising department, communication, legal team, monitoring. We also have recovery fund, which legal body, and we have these groups, as I said. This is how people work. We organize strategic session. For now, we have already 10 strategic sessions, and each citizen could easily to register and participate when they vote. But what I could say, what I don't like when participants just criticize, and when you suggest to take the work and work, sometimes they disappear. So this is what I'm not appreciating, and I kindly ask everyone who taking responsibility, being volunteer or project manager for a city, to do this. And of course, we had this climate committee, and we prepared climate analysis for our city together with European Convey of Mayors for Climate. This is a huge branch of organization all over Europe, and as well its office in Ukraine. We engaged this organization, and now we have climate plan for our city. So this kind of committee, fundraising committee or economical committee or climate committee and gender committee, they should be transparent. All over committees like architecture, design, and everything should be cross-border committee, because it's influence each of the stage. As you see, this is Gensler, biggest architect company in United States. They join us and we sign memorandums with number of organizations, and as well Green Building Council Italy, which is also give us expertise for these strategic committees. I think this is shortly what I could say about the process of reconstruction of my city, the engagement of citizens and civil societies. If you have any extra questions or you would like I clarify something, you can ask me.
Many thanks. Maybe just as a reaction, I will take just the possibility to ask you if you could share a couple of words for us on how did you find more difficult in terms of coordinating all these volunteers and sustaining engagement? Because I believe that at the beginning of these initiatives, people are extremely excited and they want to participate. But then after years of the project and of the war, people may end up being very disenchanted and demotivated. So if you could share a few words about which challenge did you find in sustaining participation, how we can learn from your strategies to maintain a good participation?
Actually, this is a risk of each project when volunteering question coming. So it should be an office of managers, which need to be not just volunteers. They should be like regular work, should be supported by foundations or organization for this. And there should be like minimum 5-10 people who, it depends from the size of the project, who organize all the process, who has the list of agenda, and who has a responsible person. Then we give the form for citizens to for applications they can apply, and then we have first strategic session for explaining what we're gonna do, how time it will take, and how much time it's gonna take, and inform them in advance. So this is a responsibilities, and if they wanna be a head of committees, they need to understand that this is responsibilities, and we need to support them. Also, during every week we had with each of the committee, we had internal meetings and support them, because sometimes they need this kind of repeat a few times the goals, the steps, the tasks, etc. So it should be very well managed projects. Community management should be very high level, especially in this situation, because at the beginning when the war began, everyone want to be engaged, but then when you need to live in conditions of the war to feed your family, when you don't have electricity, when do you have no conditions for warm your home, it becomes a question whether you have time for volunteering or not. So you need to choose correct people. They need to give responsibilities. They maybe need to sign any of documents, so that they will try to deliver some documents that they are officially in working group for reconstruction of the city, somehow to show them their status as well. And if it's possible, of course, motivate with different help. I mean, if it's a humanitarian aid which they need, and some organization could also be helpful, it also would be good. Just one moment, I would like to share with you our second project, which is very huge. The hackathon 100 ideas for Ukrainian cities. This is a project for 100 communities. Be honest, like it's around 70 communities of Ukraine, which applied to receive ideas from architects and design how their current locations or infrastructures, community reconstruction could look like. And we receive 100 projects from, again, volunteering, which we organize in frame of this project. We invite and make a nice announcement that our 100 communities is looking for new architectural ideas and rethink of their life project where they used to live, rethought and rethink for reconstruction or repairment, or it was destroyed, or just old buildings like you can see here. And then students and architectural groups all over the world, not just from Ukraine, took and released new ideas. So here you can see like memorial, you can see cinematography, and it's also like one engagement of 300 participants for this project and management already during 1 year. So it takes a lot of communication, it takes a lot of publications, explanation, webinars, and etc. But it brings, I would say, amazing results, which you could see easily in our Facebook page, IRS. And below you also can see how this project, how specialists were working, making this amazing reconstruction or resort project. Thank you.